Night kept its secrets close over Ash Mesa. A late summer storm rolled along the far ridge. Lightning stitched the clouds. The town held its breath. Somewhere beyond the livery, a horse stamped and snorted like it knew trouble by scent. Cade Mercer stepped from the shadow behind the old water trough. Dust clung to his coat. Rain freckles dotted his hat brim. He had the look of a man who had ridden too far and not far enough. A man with something to atone for and something he would not let go. He watched the saloon lantern glow like a small, warm heart against the night. Fiddle music drifted out. Laughter. The smell of whiskey and wood smoke and the memory of better days. His hand went to the scar along his ribs. A gift from another life. The pain centered him. She was inside. He knew it. He had come for supplies. That was the lie he told himself on the ride. Flour, coffee, a coil of new rope. But the truth had been pacing his chest all week. Her name was Mara Voss. Mara poured drinks at the lantern when she was not mending her father's books or tending his cough. She wore plain cotton, soft boots, a ribbon at her throat that changed color with the day. Tonight, it was a quiet blue. She moved like the desert wind over pale grass. She had never belonged to him. He had never been allowed to touch that bright place in the world. Cade pushed through the batwings. Warmth met him. Lamplight painted the bottles gold. The piano man nodded, hands finding a gentle tune. Eyes tracked Cade. They always did. Outlaws carry a weather of their own. Mara looked up. Her eyes were dusk after rain. She saw him, not just the gun on his hip or the hunger in his shoulders. She saw him, the part that once wanted to live clean. It struck him deep, the way the look of one woman could smooth a man's edges. "Evening," Cade said. He kept his voice low. He was careful with his words around her. Words had weight. "Evening," she said. Her voice was warm but guarded. "What brings you in, Mr. Mercer?" "Coffee, rope, maybe a quiet corner." "You will find all three," she said. "The quiet will cost the most." He almost smiled. Almost. The sheriff had put a price on him in counties east and west, but the lantern held its own law. Pay your tab, keep your hands polite, leave your rage at the door. A card game scraped at the far table. Old men argued kindly. A young couple whispered near the stair. Cade took a corner, the wall at his back. He did not touch the whiskey. He waited for Mara. She came after a minute, setting down a tin cup. She could feel him watching her hands. Not hungry, not crude, reverent. He knew how to hold a horse so it would not shy. He knew how to hold silence so it did not break. A man like that could hold a woman without owning her. The thought warmed and scared her at once. "Town is tense," Mara said. "Riders came through at dusk." "Looking for a man who resembles you." "I resemble many men," Cade said. "Some of them I wish I did not." She glanced toward the door as the storm grumbled. "Trouble has a long memory in this place." "Mine too," he said. He did not tell her about the robbery 2 counties over. He had not fired a shot. He had walked away when the worst of the taking started. But a man who rides with wolves comes away with their scent. He had ridden alone since. Silence breathed between them, close, not awkward. She folded her hands and looked at his knuckles. They were scarred and clean. His nails had the pale crescents of a man who worked with rope and iron and sometimes mercy. "You should not be here," she said. "My father is counting each breath. I do not need more fear." "I will leave before fear grows a face," he said. The door swung. Sheriff Elias Coulter stepped in. Tall, iron-grey, polite as a prayer at sunrise, he carried a star that had seen too much. He also carried patience for good folks and none for the rest. His gaze found Cade. It did not hurry. "Mr. Mercer," the sheriff said. "Evening." Sheriff. "Folks say a trio of riders camped near Harrow Creek. Rough men. You did not ride with them, I trust?" "I ride with my own shadow," Cade said. Mara's pulse touched her throat. The sheriff saw it. He looked at her soft blue ribbon, then back to Cade. Elias had a soft spot for the Voss family. He had helped stack wood behind their house last winter. He did not want her burned by a fire she did not start. "Be easy," the sheriff said. "The night is delicate." "I aim to keep it that way," Cade said. The sheriff nodded once and took a place near the stove. He spoke to the piano man about a hymn, as if hymns could keep wolves from the door. Maybe sometimes they could. Mara let out a breath. She set the coffee down and brushed Cade's fingers by accident. A simple touch, a quick heat that travelled too far. Her mind said no. Her pulse did not listen. Cade pulled his hand back. He looked at the scar on his knuckle, then at her small palm. "I will buy that rope tomorrow," he said. "Tonight I just needed the sound of your voice." Her eyes softened. "You should need safer things. Safety is a thin blanket out here." Thunder walked the far hills. Rain began polite and grew certain. The roof clicked with it. The smell of wet dust pushed through the cracks, sweet as memory. Mara thought of mornings when her mother was alive. A pot of coffee, bread rising, a father who laughed easier. The ache was tender and bright. What he did not know was this, the piano man sang under his breath. "Sometimes a heart asks for the one thing it cannot keep." The line caught the room. It caught Cade, too. But then she whispered, "You saved my brother on the North Trail last winter. He never told anyone. I saw his boots by the door. I saw the blood sewn back to his skin. Do not pretend you are only a shadow." Cade looked down. A rough gratitude moved in him. "I am not proud of most of my nights," he said. "Maybe that one." "Then leave this one proud too," she said. "Do not make the sheriff pick you up here." He rose. He did it slow, as if the night might break if he moved sharp. He took 2 coins from his pocket and set them on the table. "For the coffee," he said, "and for the hymn in the air." She reached to cover the coins with her hand. Her fingers brushed his again, longer this time. The smallest surrender, the smallest promise. He felt it like warmth at the edge of frost. "Walk out the back," she said. "The alley is quiet." He nodded. He turned. He took 3 steps. He stopped. He should not. He knew it. He turned back and lifted his hand, a question in it. Not a claim, not a demand. Permission asked without words. Her breath caught. She nodded once. His palm came to her cheek, warm, careful, a shelter. He did not pull her close. He did not take a kiss. He only held that quiet. Lightning laced the window. The storm hummed. She closed her eyes and leaned into a peace she had not known she was allowed to feel. A sharp knock rattled the front door. The room froze. Sheriff Coulter's hand went to his weapon. The piano fell silent. The door pushed inward. Wet boots, rough hats. 3 men. The tallest smiled with no warmth at all. "Evening," the man said. "We are hunting a rider who smells like thunder and regret." Mara felt Cade's hand leave her skin. The warmth parted like a curtain. The air turned thin. "Stay gentle," she breathed. "Please." If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close. The night is not done speaking. What waits beyond the door is only the beginning. The saloon air turned thick, like smoke before fire. The 3 riders stood in the doorway, dripping rain and menace. Their coats were black with road dust, their eyes sharp as desert glass. The tallest, lean, cruel, a scar curving his jaw, grinned slow when he saw Cade Mercer. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Didn't think you'd be foolish enough to ride into town, Cade." Cade didn't move. He didn't reach for the gun on his hip. He didn't blink either. His silence was heavier than any bullet. "Name's Silas Trent," the sheriff said, rising from his chair. "You and your boys got business here?" Silas smiled at the badge like it was a fly he might swat. "Just collecting a debt, Sheriff. Man here rode with us and forgot to share the spoils." Mara felt the room hold its breath. She stepped backward, her fingers brushing the edge of the counter. Cade's eyes followed the movement, not fear, just calculation. He was measuring distance, exits, her safety first. "I told you I wanted no part of that," Cade said, his voice low, steady. "You went on without me." "And took all the risk," Silas spat. "Now we're short a friend and a handful of silver. You owe." The sheriff's hand hovered above his gun. "This isn't your county, Trent. You'll do your collecting outside my town." Silas chuckled. "You can't wall off sin with a star, lawman. It leaks through." Rain banged against the windows. The piano keys trembled. The men behind Silas spread, their boots marking the floor wet and dark. Cade finally spoke, quieter still. "You come near her, you'll lose your hands before the next flash of lightning." That made Silas grin wider. "Her? Well now, that explains why the outlaw looks tamed." He tipped his hat toward Mara. "Pretty thing. Might be she's worth more than silver." Sheriff Coulter moved first. His gun cleared leather. But Silas was faster. The shot cracked like the sky breaking. The lamp glass shattered. Shadows leapt and danced. Cade dove sideways, pulling Mara down behind the bar. The whiskey bottles rained down around them. Her breath came fast. His arm shielded her. "You hurt?" he whispered. She shook her head. The smell of gunpowder mixed with her perfume, wild lavender, soft against the chaos. Cade's revolver was already in his hand. He peeked over the bar. The sheriff was crouched near the stove, alive but pinned. 2 of Silas's men were fanning out, one circling toward the stairs. "Stay down," Cade said. "Don't you dare." "Stay," he repeated. His eyes locked hers, the kind of look that made promises too big for words. He rose in one smooth motion. Lightning flashed behind him, carving his silhouette against the rain-smeared window. A gun barked, then another. Wood splintered. Glass screamed. Mara pressed her hand over her mouth to stop a cry. The world shrank to the sound of thunder and the rhythm of his boots. When silence came, it felt unnatural, like the air itself waited to see who had lived. Sheriff Coulter called out, "You standing, Mercer?" Cade's voice came through the haze. Standing." Silas Trent lay by the door, his pistol kicked far away. His men were gone, one limping into the street, one not moving at all. "Should have left me in peace," Cade said, holstering his weapon. The sheriff stepped forward, checking the wounded man. "He's alive, for now." Mara rose slowly, her knees unsteady. The bar was cracked. Whiskey dripped like amber tears. She looked at Cade, his face lit by the broken lantern's faint flame. "You saved more than one life tonight," she said. Cade looked at his hands, rough, scarred, trembling now that the fight had passed. "Seems that's what they do best, save what they shouldn't touch." The sheriff straightened. "You need to ride before dawn. If the law from the next county gets word, they'll come for all of you." "All of us?" Mara asked, startled. The sheriff's eyes softened. "You think they'll believe you weren't hiding him?" Cade shook his head. "No. She won't pay for my sins." He crossed the room, boots silent in the mess. When he stood close enough, Mara could see the rain still glistening in his beard, the thin cut across his cheek. He looked tired, but not broken. "You can't just vanish," she said. "You can't live always running." "I've done worse things than run." Her throat tightened. "Then let me at least give you something worth stopping for." She reached up, fingertips brushing his collar. It was damp, rough, smelled of dust and smoke and danger. He caught her hand gently, pressing it once to his chest. "That's the cruel part, Mara," he murmured. "You already did." The sheriff turned away, pretending not to hear. "I'll keep them busy till sunrise," he said. "You've got a half night to vanish." Cade nodded. "That's enough." He stepped back, eyes never leaving hers. "I'll come back for the coffee I owe." She tried to smile through the ache. "You'll find it waiting." He touched the brim of his hat, a farewell older than words, then slipped out into the rain. The saloon door swayed, creaked, and stilled. Mara stood there, listening to the storm carry his footsteps away, until all that was left was thunder fading toward the open plain. But in the silence that followed, she heard something else. A faint knock on the side door. One, then another. Urgent, not Cade's rhythm. Her breath caught. The sheriff turned, gun half raised. "Who else would come at this hour?" she whispered. Outside, the wind shifted. Boots scraped the wooden porch. A voice she didn't recognize said softly, "Ma'am, you got something that belongs to us. If this story has found a heartbeat in yours, keep close." The wind over Ash Mesa still carries the sound of pursuit, and the night is far from done. The knock came again, harder this time. 3 sharp raps that carried through the quiet saloon like gunshots buried in wood. Sheriff Coulter motioned for Mara to stay low. The lamplight flickered, trembling over broken glass and shadows. He moved toward the side door, gun drawn, every step deliberate. "Who's there?" he called, his voice steady but wary. "Someone who wants what's owed," the voice answered, rough, older, carrying the rasp of a man who'd smoked more trail dust than air. "Let us in, Sheriff. We ain't here for you." Coulter's jaw tightened. He knew that tone. Bounty men. Wolves that ran on law's leash when it paid well. Mara clutched her skirt, eyes darting toward the back where Cade had gone. Her pulse thudded so loud she thought they'd hear it. "Get behind the counter," the sheriff whispered, "and stay down." "But Cade would tell you the same." He stepped closer to the door. The wood shivered under another pounding. "Town's closed," he said. "You ride back to the ridge." "Can't do that," the voice replied. "We saw the outlaw's horse outside the livery." "You can make this easy, Sheriff. Just hand him over." Mara's throat went dry. Her mind flashed to Cade's last words. "I'll come back for the coffee I owe." That promise had barely cooled in the air. Coulter cocked his revolver. "You take one more step, and you'll find the only thing this town serves after midnight is lead." The pause that followed was long enough for Mara to hear her heart beat. Then a low chuckle came through the door. "We'll wait then," the man said. "Storm's easing. He'll ride soon enough, and we'll be here when he does." Their footsteps crunched off into the mud. The wind filled the silence again. Coulter exhaled. "They'll circle the ridge," he said. "Try to catch him on the open road." Mara stood, her hands trembling. "He doesn't know." The sheriff holstered his gun. "He's got a good head for trouble. He'll smell it before he sees it." But she shook her head. "You don't understand. Cade doesn't run from trouble. He walks straight into it." She hurried to the door, grabbed her cloak from the hook and swung it around her shoulders. Coulter's voice sharpened. "You're not riding out there." "I am." "You'll get yourself killed." "Then I'll die with a purpose." Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed steady. "He saved my brother. He saved this town tonight. I won't let him face that alone." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, rain whispering against the roof. Then he sighed and stepped aside. "The mare's still tied out back. Take her. Keep to the creek path. It'll hide your trail." Mara nodded once, grateful, determined. She pushed through the back door and into the storm. The night met her cold and sharp. Rain ran down her face, mixing with tears she didn't remember shedding. The horizon pulsed with lightning, turning the desert into a ghost world. She mounted the mare and kicked off. The horse's hooves splashed through mud, heartbeats echoing her own. The trail cut through the mesquite and dropped toward the flats where the creek shimmered like dull silver. Wind hissed through the grass, carrying voices, not real ones, just the whispers of every woman who'd ever waited for a man who might not come back. By the time she reached the ridge, the rain had eased to a mist. She saw him then, a lone figure on horseback, outlined against the faint moonlight. Cade Mercer. Coat dark with rain, head lowered, riding slow like a man who hadn't decided if he meant to live till morning. "Cade!" she called. He turned fast, gun halfway drawn before he saw her face. His shoulders dropped. "Mara? What in God's name?" "They're waiting for you," she said, pulling the mare beside him. "Bounty men. At the ridge by the east trail." He cursed softly. "Should have known Silas's blood would call the vultures." "You can't go that way." "I can't go any way for long." She reached for his arm. Her fingers met wet leather, hard muscle beneath. "Then let me help." "Mara." His voice was gentler now. "You don't belong out here. I belong where I choose." Lightning flickered again. For a breath, their faces glowed silver in the dark, two souls carved from the same ache, standing between storm and silence. He looked at her, really looked. The courage trembling behind her fear, the stubborn mercy in her eyes. "You think I'm worth saving?" he asked quietly. "I don't think," she whispered. "I know." The rain started again, softer this time, as if the sky itself was listening. Cade took her hand. "Then we ride together. But when dawn comes, I'll still be here," she said. He nodded once, then spurred his horse forward. The two of them vanished into the dark, the sound of hooves swallowed by the storm. Behind them, at the ridge, a match flared in the night. The bounty man lit his cigar, smoke curling like a warning. He smiled, watching the faint figures below. "Found you," he murmured. And in the first light of false dawn, the hunt began. If this story has touched a quiet longing in your heart, keep close. The desert holds its breath, and every shadow on the horizon carries the weight of what comes next. The desert before dawn was a quiet kind of hell, beautiful, cruel, and endless. The rain had eased, leaving behind a mist that clung to the low brush and ghosted around the horses' legs. The air smelled of iron, wet dust, and the faint sweetness of sage. Cade rode ahead, his coat heavy with water, his eyes fixed on the line where the land met the paling sky. Mara followed close, her cloak plastered to her skin, her breath sharp in the cold. They didn't speak. The night had stolen words from them, leaving only motion, rhythm, and the silent agreement to keep going. When the first red stain of dawn crept over the mesa, Cade slowed. He scanned the horizon, the ridges, the rocks, the scattered mesquite. He knew how bounty men moved. He'd been one once, long before the world burned his sense of justice down to ash. "They'll be watching the road east," he said finally. "We cut north through the dry wash." Mara nodded, though she was trembling from exhaustion. "How far will that take us?" "Far enough to buy a breath." She looked at him then, the profile of his face against the cold sunrise, unshaven jaw, the faint scar running from his temple to his ear. He looked like a man carved out of stubbornness and regret. "You could have left me," she said softly. "I could have," he answered. "Didn't want to." The words were plain, but they landed heavy between them. The horses stepped into the wash, hooves muffled in the damp sand. Wind brushed the canyon walls, carrying faint echoes that sounded like memories trying to speak. After a while, Mara's voice came quiet. "You ever think about stopping?" Cade glanced at her. "Stopping what?" "Running. Hiding. Carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you anymore." He looked away. "Every damn day." She waited, but he didn't go on, so she said what she'd kept buried. "You're not what they think, Cade. The way you looked at me in that saloon. A man whose only darkness doesn't look at anyone like that." He gave a slow, sad smile. "You'd be surprised how much light a sinner remembers." They rode in silence again. Above them, the sky bled from grey to gold. A hawk drifted overhead, lazy, watching. Cade could feel it, the shift in the air, that tightening before something breaks. "They're close," he murmured. Mara turned sharply. "How can you tell?" "Silence changes before trouble. Even the wind goes still." He was right. The world had gone too quiet. Then came the sound. Distant hooves, hard and steady. More than one rider. The bounty men had found the trail. Cade cursed under his breath. "We need cover." He pointed to a bluff ahead, where an old mining shack leaned against the rock face like a tired ghost. They spurred their horses toward it, dust kicking up behind them. By the time they reached the shack, the sun was just breaking the horizon. Cade helped Mara down and tied the horses behind the rocks. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of rust and old wood. Mara leaned against the wall, catching her breath. Cade checked his revolver. 3 bullets left. Enough if he didn't miss. "They'll be here in minutes," he said. "And if they find us, then I make sure they don't leave with a story to tell." She stepped closer, eyes fierce. "No, you're not dying out here. Not after everything." Cade looked down at her, rain-damp hair clinging to her cheeks, eyes too bright for this hard land. "If it comes to it," he said, "you ride. Don't look back." "I won't." Her voice was steady. "Because I'm not leaving you." He wanted to argue, but something in her gaze stopped him, the kind of look that turned a man's resolve soft as rain-soaked earth. "You don't even know who I am, Mara." She reached up, her fingers grazing the edge of his jaw. "Then tell me." He hesitated. "I was a deputy once, sheriff's man, rode for the law until the law turned on me. They hung my brother on a lie, and I stopped believing the badge meant justice." She watched him, her throat tight. "And now?" "Now I just try to make right where I can, even if it's too late for me." "It's not," she whispered. "Not while you still care enough to protect someone else." His hand came up, almost without thought, and caught hers. The warmth between their palms felt out of place in that dying shack. It steadied him, like he'd been falling for years, and finally hit something soft enough to hold. "Mara," he said, voice rough. "If I don't make it, you will," she cut in. "Don't speak like a man already buried." He almost smiled, but the sound of horses cut him short. They were here. Cade moved to the doorway, crouched low, gun ready. Dust rose on the trail below. 4 riders, dark coats, rifles gleaming in the morning light. Mara stepped beside him, holding the spare pistol the sheriff had slipped her before she left. Her hands shook, but her aim didn't waver. "Stay behind me," Cade said. "Not a chance." He looked at her once more, saw the fire under the fear. The outlaw and the woman he couldn't have, standing together against a world that had no mercy for either of them. The riders slowed, spreading out like wolves circling. One shouted, "Mercer, come out and drop the lady. Won't be no need for blood if you make it easy." Cade answered with silence. Then he whispered to her, "When I count to 3, get low." Mara's breath trembled. "Cade." 1. The riders moved closer. 2. The wind held its breath. 3. Gunfire split the morning wide open. If this story has stirred the dust of your heart, stay close. The smoke is still rising over Ash Mesa, and in that broken dawn, every shot still echoes with what might yet be saved. The sound of gunfire tore the dawn apart. Echoes rolled off the canyon walls like thunder, remembering its own anger. Cade fired twice, hitting the lead rider's shoulder before ducking back behind the doorframe. Splinters rained over him. Mara crouched low, her breath sharp, her pistol trembling in her hand. "Stay down," he hissed. "I said I'm not leaving you," she shot back, voice trembling but sure. Bullets slammed into the wooden shack, thudding into beams, kicking dust into the thin morning light. Cade leaned out again, quick and precise. Another shot, another man down. But there were still two left, circling wide. He could hear their horses shifting, snorting, nervous under the scent of fear. Mara's heart pounded so hard it hurt. The gun in her hands felt heavy, unnatural. She had never fired one before. She thought of her father, his voice calm, always saying, "Steady hands save more than bullets." She drew a slow breath, sighted the shadow of a man flanking left, and squeezed the trigger. The sound cracked like lightning. The rider's hat flew off, and his horse reared, throwing him hard into the sand. Mara gasped, hand shaking. Cade glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. "Good aim." "Luck," she whispered. "Luck counts." Then came silence, not the soft kind, but the kind that presses against the skin, heavy with what comes next. Cade stepped to the doorway again, scanning the wash. Dust hung low, horses gone. The last man had vanished into the ridge. He turned back to her, chest heaving. "We move now." She nodded, still pale. "Where?" "There's an old shepherd's hut near Devil's Arch. Half a day's ride." "We can rest there." Mara looked at him. His face streaked with dust and sweat, his eyes dark with the weight of too many choices. She wanted to argue, to say she couldn't go any farther, but she saw the storm still chasing him in his gaze and found her strength again. "I'll keep up," she said. He gave a short nod and began gathering what little they had. Saddlebags, canteen, the small pouch of bullets left. Outside, the horses shifted restlessly, the smell of gunpowder still sharp in the air. They rode out through the wash as the sun broke fully over the horizon. The light was clean, golden, merciless. Cade led the way, and for a while the only sound was the creak of leather and the tired rhythm of hooves. By midday, they stopped near a small creek that wound between the rocks like a silver thread. Mara dismounted slowly, her legs unsteady. Cade filled the canteen and handed it to her. She drank, water running down her chin. "I've never been shot at before." "Most folks don't plan to be," he said, "but you handled yourself better than most men I've known." "That's not saying much," she said, smiling weakly. Cade's mouth curved, just a ghost of a smile, but it softened him in a way that startled her. For a moment, he didn't look like an outlaw. He looked like a man who might have once believed in peace. She sat by the creek, letting the sound of running water calm her. Cade crouched beside her, washing the blood from a scrape on his forearm. She reached to help, fingers brushing his skin, tracing the faint scar there. "Does it hurt?" "Not much." "You've got too many scars to say that honestly." He looked at her then, the air between them shifting. Some wounds stop bleeding even when they shouldn't. Others never start. She met his gaze, something raw and quiet passing between them. Her hand lingered on his arm. His eyes dropped to where her fingers rested, pale against the rough tan of his skin. He didn't move away. The wind stirred the grass, slow and warm. For a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. "Cade," she said softly, "if they find you again, if we don't make it to wherever you're running, what happens then?" "Then it ends," he said simply, "one way or another." "I don't want it to end." He exhaled, long and slow. "Neither do I." Their eyes held, too long, too deep. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was rough, uncertain, like he was afraid to find comfort there. "You shouldn't look at me that way," he murmured. "How else can I?" He wanted to tell her to stop, to save her heart from his curse. But when she leaned in, close enough for her breath to warm his jaw, every word he'd meant to say burned away. Their lips met, soft, hesitant, and inevitable. The kind of kiss that feels like it was waiting in the world long before they were born. When they finally broke apart, the desert seemed changed, brighter, quieter, dangerous in a new way. Mara's eyes shimmered with fear and something far stronger. "What now?" Cade looked at her, his voice rough. "Now we ride faster." He stood, helping her back into the saddle, his hands lingering a moment too long on her waist. The road stretched endless ahead, dry, empty, and waiting. As they rode north, storm clouds gathered again, slow and black, rolling from the horizon like a promise. Behind them, the last bounty man reined his horse atop the ridge, rifle in hand, watching their trail fade into the valley. He lit a match, the flame trembling in the wind. "Run while you can," he muttered. "I've got time." And far below, two riders vanished into the desert heart, outlaw and woman, chasing hope that had no right to live beneath that sky. If this story has brushed against a quiet corner of your soul, stay close. The storm is rising again, and love in the west never rides alone. By afternoon, the sky had turned the color of old pewter. Wind swept across the plain, carrying the smell of rain and lightning still waiting to strike. Cade and Mara rode side by side, the distance between them thin as breath, yet full of everything unspoken. The land stretched endless, broken mesas, low hills, and the long hush of waiting thunder. Cade's hat was pulled low, his jaw set. Mara watched the way he moved with his horse, all control and restraint, like a man used to mastering storms outside and inside himself. "You've gone quiet," she said softly. "Quiet keeps me breathing." "You think too much silence can kill a man?" He gave her a small smile. "It's not the silence that kills. It's what it lets you hear." For a long time, there was only the wind. Then he said, "We'll reach Devil's Arch by dusk. We'll rest there a night." "What's there?" "Old mining hut. Roof leaks, but it's dry enough to keep a heart beating till morning." She nodded, glancing at the horizon where a dark curve of stone jutted up like a scar. "And after?" "After?" He hesitated. "You go home." "And you?" "I keep riding. Always do." The words hurt more than she expected. She bit her lip, looking away. Maybe home doesn't mean much anymore. Cade turned his head toward her, his expression unreadable. "Don't say that." "Why not? My father's sick, the town's half afraid of its own shadow, and the only man who's ever made me feel seen can't stay." He drew in a breath like the sound alone burned. "Mara." But she rode ahead, eyes on the horizon. "Forget it." The storm finally broke. Fat drops of rain splattered the dust, soft at first, then wild. Lightning flashed behind them, thunder rumbling close enough to feel in the bones. "Arch is just ahead," Cade called, his voice rising over the wind. By the time they reached the shelter, both were soaked through. The old mining hut leaned against the rocks like a wounded animal, its roof patched with rusted tin and memory. Cade pulled the door open, and they slipped inside. It was dark and smelled of rain, earth, and forgotten fire. Cade struck a match, lighting a small lamp. The glow fell over the space. One cot, a wooden crate, and a half-broken stove. Mara wrung the water from her cloak, her hair clinging to her face. Cade looked away, then back again, something in him softening despite himself. "I'll get a fire going," he said quietly. He gathered what dry wood he could find near the walls. Soon the flames caught, flickering gold over his features. His face looked carved from the same light that burned the west, all rough edges and quiet strength. Mara knelt beside the fire, holding her hands near it. "Feels strange," she said. "What does?" "To be safe, even for a moment." Cade sat down across from her, elbows on his knees. "Don't trust it too much. Safety's just a pause before the world remembers your name." She looked into the fire, her voice soft. "You really believe that?" He didn't answer. The flames cracked, shadows moving like slow ghosts. She studied him in the shifting light, the small lines near his eyes, the faint tremor in his hand when he thought she wasn't watching. "You ever want something you shouldn't?" she asked. He gave a short laugh, low and tired. "You have no idea." Her gaze didn't waver. "Maybe I do." The air between them tightened. The rain outside deepened, drumming steady on the tin roof. "Mara," he said, his voice rough, warning. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't look at me like that, like I'm something worth keeping." She leaned closer, her eyes dark and steady. "You are." He shook his head. "I'm an outlaw with too many ghosts. Then maybe it's time one of them turned into light." The words hit him like a quiet mercy. He reached for her hand without thinking, his thumb brushing the back of her fingers. The touch was soft, reverent. Her pulse fluttered beneath his skin. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. "If things were different, if you weren't hunted, if the world wasn't cruel, would you have stayed that night in the saloon?" Cade met her eyes, and something inside him broke free. "I would have never left." She moved closer until the firelight painted her face in gold and shadow. "Then don't leave now." He swallowed hard. The storm roared above them. He could hear his heartbeat, her breathing, the fire whispering like it knew every sin they both carried. "I can't promise forever," he said. "I'm not asking for forever." She breathed. "Just tonight." The distance between them disappeared. He kissed her like a man starving for something he'd been too proud to admit he needed. Her hands slid up his shoulders, her breath catching against his mouth. The fire flared, casting wild light across the walls. Outside, thunder rolled again, and the rain poured harder, as if the sky itself envied them. When the storm finally eased, they lay tangled near the fire, her head on his chest, his hand tracing small circles against her back. The silence between them felt sacred, not empty. "You're shivering," he murmured. "I'm fine," she whispered. "I've never felt more alive." He closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her against him ease the weight he'd carried for years. For the first time, the world didn't feel like something he had to fight. But peace never lasts long in the West. From outside came the faint creak of saddle leather and the crunch of boots in wet sand. Cade's eyes snapped open. His hand went to his gun. Mara stiffened, feeling the change in him. "What is it?" He rose slowly, every muscle tight. "We're not alone." If this story has stirred the storm inside your chest, stay close. The rain may have ended, but the night beyond Devil's Arch has only just begun. The sound came again, slow, deliberate footsteps through the mud outside the cabin. Cade's breath stilled. Every instinct he'd ever learned whispered one word: trap. He motioned for Mara to stay quiet. The fire crackled, soft and steady, mocking the tension that filled the room. He moved to the window, gun drawn, and peered through the crack in the warped wood. A single lantern swayed in the darkness. Its glow moved with the rhythm of a man's walk, calm, unhurried. That kind of walk only belonged to someone certain of what waited inside. Cade's jaw tightened. "He's alone," he murmured. Mara sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. "You know him?" "I don't have to. Men like that don't come to talk." The steps stopped. Silence pressed against the door. Then a voice, calm, smooth, like oil sliding over glass. "Cade Mercer, you've been busy." Cade's heart sank. He knew that voice. "Rhett Lawson," he muttered. "Didn't think you'd crawl this far west." "Had reason to," the voice said. "Silver Ridge still remembers you, the deputy who shot his own badge brother and vanished." Mara's eyes widened. "Is that true?" Cade didn't look at her. "Not the way he tells it." Rhett's laugh was low, unkind. "Truth's a hard thing to ride with. You got something belongs to me, Mercer. A ledger from the bank job last year. You hand it over, and maybe I let the lady breathe long enough to pray." Cade's mind raced. He'd taken that ledger from Silas Trent's saddle before the law could twist it. It held proof of who had ordered the robbery, and it wasn't him. But Rhett didn't want truth. He wanted silence. He raised his voice. "The ledger burned in the saloon fire." Rhett chuckled. "Now that's a shame. Guess I'll have to take what's left of you instead." The door handle turned. Cade stepped back, gun leveled. The door creaked open, wind pushing in with the smell of rain and smoke. Rhett Lawson stood there, tall, lean, face shadowed by the lantern in his hand. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Evening," Rhett said. "Cozy little hideout you've found. Shame to ruin it." Mara stood, defiant, despite the fear in her chest. "You don't have to do this." Rhett's gaze slid over her, cold and calculating. "Ma'am, I've spent my life doing what I didn't have to." Cade fired first. The shot hit Rhett's lantern, shattering glass and throwing fire across the doorway. Rhett dove aside, shooting back. Sparks scattered like stars. Mara dropped to the floor as bullets tore through the air. Cade rolled behind the table, firing again. One bullet caught Rhett's shoulder, spinning him against the frame. He cursed, clutching the wound. "Still fast," Rhett hissed. "You never could miss when it mattered. Guess some habits don't die." The fire spread quick, licking up the dry boards. Smoke thickened, curling through the room. Mara coughed. "Cade, we have to get out." He grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the back door. Rhett's gun cracked again, the bullet grazing Cade's ribs. He grunted, but didn't slow. He kicked the door open, pulling Mara into the storm. They stumbled into the rain, the wind tearing at them. The hut blazed behind, lighting the night orange and cruel. Cade pressed a hand to his side, blood warm beneath his fingers. Mara saw it and froze. "You're hit," she gasped. "It's nothing." "Don't lie to me." He gave her a strained smile. "Fine, it's something." She tore a strip from her skirt, pressing it to the wound. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned steady. "Hold still." Lightning split the sky. In its flash, Cade saw Rhett's figure limping from the cabin, gun in hand, rage painted on his face. "Mara!" She turned, saw him too. The next moment stretched like eternity. Rhett raised his gun. Cade pushed her aside and fired first. The shot echoed across the valley. Rhett staggered, eyes wide, the firelight dancing in them one last time. Then he fell, face to the mud, lantern glow dying beside him. The rain fell harder, washing the blood from Cade's hands. He stood there, chest heaving, until Mara wrapped her arms around him. "It's over," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "It's just quieter." She pressed her cheek to his chest. His heartbeat was strong, heavy, stubborn. "You saved us both." He looked down at her, rain dripping from his hat brim. "You saved me first." The flames from the hut began to fade, smoke curling up into the dawn. They stood together in the open storm, outlaw and woman, both marked, both free for the first time in too long. "I can't go back to town," he said after a while. "I know." "You could." She lifted her head, meeting his eyes. "I won't." "Mara, you think I can walk away from this? From you?" Her voice broke, then steadied. "I'd rather live in the wild with you than safe in a town that's forgotten how to feel." He brushed his thumb across her lips, a tremor in his touch. "You don't know what that means." "I know exactly what it means." The storm softened to drizzle. The first pale streaks of dawn stretched over the desert. He exhaled, long and slow, then nodded. "All right, then." She smiled through the rain. "All right." They turned toward the open plains, bruised sky above, smoke behind, and began to walk. Each step carried the weight of what they'd lost, and the wild hope of what might still be waiting. If this story has warmed a fragile place inside you, stay close. The rain may be easing, but the road ahead is long, and even the dawn in the west has its shadows. The dawn came slow and grey, seeping across the desert like a secret not yet ready to be told. Cade and Mara rode through the thinning rain, their shadows long and broken across the wet sand. The fire behind them was gone now, just smoke curling up into a sky that didn't seem to care. Cade's side burned where the bullet had grazed him, but he kept his face still. He'd been hurt before. Worse than this. Yet something about her riding beside him made the pain sharper, more real. "You should rest," she said softly. "You're bleeding again." He shook his head. "If we stop, we give the law a head start." "There's no one left to chase you," she said. He didn't answer. Mara guided her horse closer, studying his face, the tight jaw, the pale line around his mouth. "You don't have to keep running from ghosts, Cade. They're faster than you think." The wind tugged at her cloak. "Then maybe it's time to stop letting them lead." He turned to her, and for the first time she saw not the outlaw or the fighter, but the man, tired, haunted, and human. His voice dropped low. "You think there's a place for a man like me to stop?" "Maybe not a place," she said, "but a person." Their eyes met. The space between them felt small enough to break. They rode in silence for miles. The land flattened out, the soil turning redder, softer under the hooves. The storm had washed the air clean. A coyote's cry echoed somewhere beyond the ridge. By noon they reached a stretch of grassland. Cade slowed his horse and pointed toward a lonely line of cottonwoods near a creek. "We'll make camp there. You'll get a fire started. I'll see to the horses." Mara nodded. She gathered branches, her fingers raw but steady. The small flame caught quickly, curling blue before warming into gold. When Cade came back, he lowered himself near the fire with a quiet groan. "You need to lie down," she said, frowning. "I've lied down too many times when I should have stood up." "Then sit still." She knelt beside him, tearing more cloth to press against his side. Blood had soaked through the bandage she'd tied hours ago. When she touched him, his whole body went rigid. "I'm not made for tenderness," he muttered. "Then let me be." He looked down at her, her hands steady on his ribs, her hair falling over her cheek. Rainwater still glimmered in the strands like pieces of the storm. He couldn't remember the last time someone had touched him without anger or fear. When she finished, she sat back on her heels. "Better?" "Only because you're the one asking." For a long while they said nothing. The fire cracked softly. The wind moved the grass around them, whispering low and constant like breath. Mara broke the silence first. "You said you used to wear the badge." Cade nodded slowly. "Years ago, before I learned law and justice don't ride the same trail." "What happened?" He stared into the fire. "My brother, Jesse. We were deputies under Sheriff Alden. Town hero, everyone said. Turns out he was selling the law to the highest bidder. When Jesse found proof, Alden set him up. Called it a shootout gone wrong. I took the blame. I ran. Never stopped." Mara's throat ached. "And that ledger Silas carried?" It was Alden's handwriting, proof of every man he bought and sold. If the right eyes ever saw it, the truth would crawl out of the dirt. "You still have it?" He met her gaze. "Hidden under my saddle. Then we take it to the next town, to someone who can make it matter." He shook his head. "They'll bury it, same as before. Some truths die easier than men." "Not if you fight for it." He smiled. "Small, tired, beautiful. You've got more faith than this land deserves." "I've got faith in you," she said. Something in him cracked open. He reached for her hand, slow, unsure. She didn't pull away. Her fingers laced with his, soft against calloused skin. "You don't know what you're saying," he murmured. "I know exactly what I'm saying." He stared at their joined hands, outlaw and innocent, dirt and grace. And the firelight turned her eyes to amber, full of quiet daring. "Every time I touch you," he said, "it feels like I'm stealing something holy." "Maybe holiness isn't something that can be stolen," she whispered. "Maybe it's something that finds you when you've run out of places to hide." The words lingered in the air, heavy and gentle all at once. He cupped her cheek, thumb tracing the faint line of a raindrop still clinging there. She leaned into his touch, eyes closing, lips parting just slightly. Invitation and forgiveness in one breath. He kissed her. Slower this time, not from hunger, but from gratitude. The kind of kiss that asks for nothing and still takes everything. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "You could still go back," she whispered. "Clear your name." "I don't care about my name anymore." "Then care about what it could mean for your brother, for the truth." The wind rose again, scattering the fire's sparks like tiny stars. Cade looked toward the dark line of the horizon. If I ride into Silver Ridge again, I won't ride out." "Then we go together," she said. He shook his head, almost smiling. "You've got the heart of a fool." "I've got the heart of a woman who's already chosen." He laughed, quiet, broken, real. Then the sound faded, replaced by the long sigh of the plains. In the distance, a hawk circled low. Cade watched it, eyes narrowing. "They'll be tracking us by now. Someone will follow Rhett's trail. They'll find the fire. We've got maybe a day before the next wave." Mara's hand found his again. "Then let's make it count." He looked at her. The woman he wasn't supposed to have. The one who had somehow made him remember what peace tasted like. "All right," he said softly. "We'll ride to Silver Ridge at dawn." The fire burned low, and the night folded around them, full of whispers and unfinished prayers. If this story has reached the quiet corners of your heart, stay close. The road to Silver Ridge runs through more than dust and danger. It runs through redemption itself. Dawn came without mercy. A thin, cold light spread over the plains, washing the world in grey. Cade stood by the creek, his hat pulled low, staring at the horizon. He had seen mornings like this before, the kind that came before blood. Behind him, Mara packed what little they had left. Her movements were quiet but sure. Every motion, every fold of the blanket carried a kind of fragile determination. "You don't have to do this," he said finally, voice low. She looked up. "I already am." Cade turned, the wind tugging at his coat. "Silver Ridge isn't a place for hope. It's where good intentions get buried." "Then we'll dig them up." He almost smiled. "You sound like someone who's never lost." "I sound like someone who's tired of watching others lose for nothing." He looked at her for a long time. There was no fear in her eyes now, just fire, a steadiness that humbled him. "You remind me of my brother," he said softly. "Always believed one truth could change everything." "Maybe it can," she whispered. They saddled the horses and rode. The trail wound through canyons, narrow and steep, where the sun barely reached. Cade rode ahead, eyes scanning the shadows. Mara followed close, the rhythmic clop of hooves echoing against the stone. As the day stretched on, the landscape opened again, wide and harsh. Silver Ridge lay beyond the next valley, a dust-bitten town surrounded by the ghosts of mines long gone dry. Cade could already see the faint glint of rooftops in the distance. He slowed his horse. "Once we cross that ridge, there's no turning back." Mara's reply came without hesitation. "Then we keep going." They reached the edge of the valley as the sun began to set, a deep red bleeding across the horizon. Cade pulled up his horse, dismounted, and untied the saddlebag. He drew out the ledger, worn leather, edges burnt, pages marked with the ink of men who had bought and sold lives. Mara took it carefully, as if it might break. "This is the proof? It's enough to hang half the lawmen in 2 counties. Then we show it." He shook his head. "We show it to the right person. There's a preacher in Silver Ridge, Josiah Grant. He's not afraid of truth, not yet. He'll know how to make it seen." Mara held his gaze. "And after?" Cade hesitated. "After, I don't know." "Then let's find out." They rode into Silver Ridge at dusk. The streets were quiet, the town half asleep beneath the low hum of wind. Cade felt every eye that wasn't there, the kind of silence that only comes when fear has moved in and made itself at home. They stopped by the small white church at the end of Main Street. The door stood open, candlelight flickering inside. The preacher looked up as they entered, grey-haired, eyes sharp as a blade, polished by kindness. "Cade Mercer," he said softly. "I wondered when the storm would blow you back this way." Cade nodded once. "I'm not here for confession." "Then what brings you?" "Truth," Cade said, and set the ledger on the table. "A sheriff named Alden, my brother Jesse. The lies that hung him." The preacher opened the book, his eyes scanning the pages. His jaw tightened. "Good Lord, this is enough to bring the whole territory to its knees." "That's the plan," Cade said. The preacher looked between them. "You understand what happens when this comes out?" "I do," Cade said. "So does she." Mara stepped forward. "The people deserve to know." The preacher nodded slowly. "Then the Lord's given you a hard road, and me a dangerous calling." He closed the ledger. "I'll take it from here. I'll make sure it's printed before anyone can bury it again." Cade exhaled, the weight of years leaving his shoulders in pieces. "Thank you." But peace is a fragile thing in the West. It never lasts long. A shout rang from outside. Then another. Boots pounded against the boardwalk. Cade's instincts flared. He moved to the window. Down the street, a half-dozen riders were coming hard, dust rising behind them. At their front rode Sheriff Alden himself, the same man who had framed his brother. His badge gleamed in the dying light like a weapon. "Guess word travels fast," Cade muttered. The preacher's face went pale. "He'll burn the church to ash before he lets this see daylight." Mara's voice trembled. "What do we do?" Cade checked his revolver. "You stay behind me." "No," she said, fierce. "We face them together." He met her eyes, saw the fear and courage tangled there, and nodded. "Together, then." The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. The church door rattled under the first kick. "Mercer!" Alden's voice boomed. "You've got something that don't belong to you." Cade stepped forward, the firelight catching his face. "That's where you're wrong, Sheriff. It belongs to every soul you've cheated." Alden laughed, deep and cruel. "You think a dead man can change the story?" Cade cocked his gun. "Let's find out." The door burst open. The sheriff's men poured in, rifles raised. Cade fired first, the air filled with smoke, flame, and fury. The preacher ducked behind the pulpit, shielding the ledger. Mara grabbed a fallen rifle, firing toward the window. Alden's voice roared above the chaos. "You'll die same as your brother. Then I'll die proving he was worth more than your law ever was." The last thing Cade saw before the smoke swallowed everything was Mara, standing in the firelight, her face streaked with tears and ash, defiant and beautiful, the woman he could never have but somehow already belonged to. The shots came fast after that. Then silence. If this story has left your heart pounding like hooves in the dust, stay close. The night at Silver Ridge isn't over, and redemption always demands its price. The gunfire faded, leaving only the ringing echo of what had been lost. Smoke curled through the church rafters, soft and ghostly, wrapping itself around the pews like a shroud. The last light of sunset burned through the broken door, painting the floor in red and gold. Cade Mercer lay half-sitting against the altar, his gun still warm in his hand. Blood darkened the side of his shirt, spreading slow. Every breath was a weight. The preacher knelt beside him, face pale, but steady. "It's done," Josiah said quietly. "Alden's down. His men fled. The ledger's safe." Cade gave a faint smile. "Took a decade to end one lie." Mara crawled across the floor to him, her hands shaking, hair wild from smoke. "You're bleeding too much." He reached for her hand, finding it easily, as if he'd known where it would be, even in the dark. "Don't cry, Mara. Don't tell me that," she whispered. "You promised we'd see dawn together." He looked at her, eyes tired but alive, and managed a small laugh that broke on his lips. "Guess I kept part of it. It's almost dawn." Outside, the wind shifted. The fire that had started at the doorway began to die. The preacher hurried to the ledger, wrapping it in a wet cloak, then turned back. "I'll ride out before sunrise," he said. "The printing press in Calverton will have this truth by noon." Cade nodded. "Make sure my brother's name's the first thing they read." "You have my word." The preacher slipped out, boots crunching softly on the dust. The church door creaked shut behind him. Mara leaned closer, pressing her forehead to Cade's. "Stay with me." He looked at her, the woman who had walked into a gunfight for him, who had seen more worth in his soul than he ever had. "You saved me," he said. "No," she murmured. "You saved me first." He smiled faintly. "Then we're even." She shook her head, tears falling onto his collar. "No, Cade. I'm not done owing you." He brushed his thumb across her cheek. "Then owe me a life. Yours. Go where the dust can't find you. Build something clean." "I don't want clean," she said, her voice breaking. "I want you." He closed his eyes. "You've got me." For a moment, neither moved. The firelight dimmed. The smell of gunpowder faded into rain. Soft, steady rain falling through the holes in the roof. It tapped against wood, against skin, washing the blood into small, dark rivers that led nowhere and everywhere. Mara's breath trembled. "Cade, please, look at me." He did. His eyes were clear, like dawn through smoke. "You'll see me again," he said. "Every time the rain starts over the plains, that's me. Still riding, still watching." She held his hand until it went still. Then she kept holding it, because letting go felt like erasing the world. When the sun finally broke over the ridges, Silver Ridge was quiet again. The preacher's horse tracks led east toward Calverton and the promise of truth. And Mara Voss, the woman the outlaw couldn't have, stood outside the church doorway, his hat clutched to her chest. The sky stretched wide above her, painted in gold and ash. She whispered into the wind, "You were wrong, Cade Mercer. Even the wild finds peace." Then she turned and walked away from the smoking town, the sunrise at her back, the memory of him in every heartbeat. Weeks later, a newspaper reached every saloon, every ranch house, every forgotten post along the Western Trail. Sheriff's corruption exposed. Former Deputy Mercer cleared in decade-old case. Some said the story was legend. Some said it was redemption. But every time a storm swept across the mesa and the thunder rolled soft and low, folks swore they could hear a man's voice in the wind, calm, steady, the sound of a soul finally free. If this story has touched a quiet place in your heart, let it stay a while. The dust may settle, but the West still breathes, in every love too wild to tame, and every truth too strong to die.